A bitter winter sunrise cast long shadows across the Dalton estate, the morning the twins realized the boy they once saved had returned, not as family, but as a threat. Before we continue, tell me where you're watching from, and make sure to subscribe to the channel. Ethan and Lucas Dalton, identical in every feature, from their sharp jawlines to their light beards and neatly styled blonde-brown hair, had built their fortune in the heart of Chicago. Their mansion, perched on the edge of Lake Michigan, was a symbol of the empire they'd built together, and for years they believed nothing could shake the legacy they created. They were still in their early 30s when they took in Adam Hale, a quiet, dark-haired orphan whose troubled past made him cling to the twins with fierce devotion. They raised him as their own, gave him education, wealth, and a home where silence no longer meant danger. For a while, it felt like redemption, both for the boy and for the brothers, but somewhere along the way, love turned into distance, distance into resentment, resentment into something far more dangerous. On that icy morning, Ethan found a thick envelope left at the front gate. No signature, no return address. Inside was a set of documents exposing financial discrepancies in the Dalton Corporation. Lucas dismissed it as an attack from competitors until he noticed a small symbol at the bottom of the last page. A raven. Adam's childhood drawing. A mark he used to sign every sketch he made. Lucas's voice dropped to a whisper. He's back. What neither brother knew, not yet, was that Adam hadn't returned to reconnect. He'd returned to dismantle everything they loved, piece by piece. The city hummed beneath the Dalton Tower, a 70-story monument of glass and ambition. From Ethan's office on the top floor, Chicago looked calm, too calm for the storm that was quietly unraveling inside their lives. Lucas paced behind him, fists clenched, his reflection trembling against the panoramic windows. He wouldn't do this, Lucas muttered, more to himself than to his brother. Adam loved us. We saved him. Ethan didn't answer. He remembered the boy Adam used to be, gentle, brilliant, always sketching on scraps of paper. But he also remembered the older Adam, the one who grew distant during college, avoiding family dinners, arguing fiercely about the company's ethics, questioning decisions that had built their empire. The last argument had ended with him walking away. No goodbye, no forwarding address, just silence, a silence that lasted 6 years. Ethan slid the documents back onto the desk. These numbers, Adam would be the only one who knew where to look. And the raven symbol, that wasn't an accident. Before Lucas could respond, Evelyn Park, their longtime CFO, burst into the room. Her expression alone made Ethan's stomach tighten. "We have a problem," she said. "A major shareholder just sold off his entire stake overnight, and someone bought it all in cash." "Who?" Lucas demanded. Evelyn hesitated, then she placed a folder on the table. Inside was a single name attached to a shell corporation recently activated in California. A.H. Holdings, Adam Hale. Lucas froze. Ethan's pulse thudded in his ears. "He's not just coming after our company," Evelyn whispered. "He's taking it from the inside." The twins exchanged a look, a silent echo of their childhood communication. For the first time, fear lived behind their identical eyes, and deep in Los Angeles, in a minimalist penthouse far from the snow and memories of Chicago, Adam Hale stared at the city lights with a cold determination. The blueprint of his plan was laid out before him. The brothers who had saved his life were about to learn the price of breaking his heart. But what came next changed everything. The next morning, the Dalton Tower felt different, tense, as if the building itself sensed the betrayal tightening around its steel frame. Ethan arrived before sunrise, hoping the quiet would clear his thoughts. Instead, he found a small black envelope waiting on his desk. No name, no seal, Just a thin card inside with a handwritten message. Every empire begins with trust and ends with truth. A H. Ethan's breath caught. Adam's handwriting hadn't changed. Sharp, precise, almost artistic. But the message wasn't a threat. It felt like a warning or a promise. Lucas stormed in moments later, still wearing his overcoat, snow melting onto the carpet. "Evelyn just called. We have another issue." Ethan didn't even have to ask. "The board," he guessed. Lucas nodded. "Adam's been reaching out to them individually. Somehow he knows every vulnerability, every grudge, every disagreement we've had with them. He's using our past against us." Ethan leaned back, the weight of old memories settling over him. Adam had grown up inside these walls, seen how decisions were made, listened to late-night arguments the brothers thought he couldn't hear. He knew their strengths, but more importantly, he knew their weaknesses. Lucas lowered his voice. "There's something else. Someone broke into our archived financial servers last night." "You think it was him?" "No." Lucas swallowed. "I think it was someone helping him." That possibility chilled Ethan more than the winter air outside. Across town, Evelyn sat alone in her office, staring at an encrypted message on her screen, one she had no right to open but couldn't ignore. "You know what they did. You know what they hid. Help me, and no one will ever know your part in it." H. Evelyn closed her laptop with trembling hands. Adam wasn't just dismantling the company. He was unearthing secrets the twins had buried long before he entered their lives, secrets that, if revealed, could ruin them. In Los Angeles, Adam stood in front of a wall of screens, each displaying data from the Dalton Empire. But it wasn't the numbers that held his attention. It was a photo taped beside the monitors. A younger version of himself, smiling between Ethan and Lucas, holding a sketchbook. He touched the corner of the picture. "This time," he whispered, "I'm not the one who gets hurt." He had no idea the worst was yet to come. Mid-story CTA. If this story is already touching you, leave a like. It helps the channel a lot. The conference room on the 48th floor had seen its share of tense negotiations, but never like this. Snow whipped against the floor-to-ceiling windows as the Dalton board members filed in, their expressions guarded. Some avoided Ethan's eyes, others refused to look at Lucas at all. The air smelled faintly of coffee, cologne, and fear. Ethan straightened his tie, feeling the pressure behind his ribcage. Lucas stood beside him, jaw tight, knuckles white around a folder he hadn't opened yet. "We control 51%, Lucas muttered under his breath. "They can shake, but they can't move without us." "That used to be true," Ethan replied, "before Adam started buying people instead of shares." The board settled. Evelyn walked in last, her usually calm face unreadable. She took her seat without a word. Ethan started. "Thank you all for coming on such short notice. I'm aware there's been concern regarding recent activity around our company stock. I want to be absolutely clear. Dalton Corp is stable, profitable, and under control." A board member named Gregory Shaw, an older man with sharp eyes and an old grievance, leaned forward. "Under control," he repeated. "One of your largest shareholders sold overnight to a shell company controlled by a man you raised and then drove away. Another has just received an offer 3 times above market value to do the same. Your former son is orchestrating a hostile takeover, and you call this under control." A murmur rippled around the table. Lucas stepped in. "Adam is misinformed and acting out of bitterness. This is a family matter." "Family?" Gregory cut in. "That boy is the only one who ever asked why there was a discrepancy in the numbers the year your father died." The room went very still. Ethan felt a cold sweat prickle the back of his neck. "Gregory, this isn't the time." "It's exactly the time," Gregory insisted. Because if Adam Hale exposes what happened in 2008, this won't just be about a takeover, it'll be about federal charges. Every eye turned to the twins. Across the table, Evelyn's gaze dropped to her hands. She could feel Adam's encrypted email burning in her mind. You know what they did. You know what they hid. Lucas's voice was low, dangerous. We're not revisiting old ghosts. Maybe you don't have a choice, Gregory replied, because someone already is. He slid a printed email into the center of the table. Ethan recognized the logo immediately, a major financial news outlet. At the top of the page, a subject line, Inquiry, Alleged Dalton Corp. SEC Violations, 2008. Request for comment. A wave of nausea rolled through Ethan. That year was a locked room in his memory, one he never wanted to open again. The year their father died, the year they saved the company, the year an unknown investor lost everything overnight. That investor had been Adam Hale's father. Evelyn finally spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. They're going to find out, Ethan, with or without you. The room blurred at the edges. In a flash, he was back in his 20s, standing in a cramped office, watching his father sign papers with shaking hands, deals made in desperation, numbers massaged, lines blurred, the markets crashed, the Dalton name survived. Adam's father did not. Meeting adjourned, Ethan said suddenly, his voice brittle. We'll reconvene when we have legal counsel present. The board protested, but Lucas was already at his side, ushering him out. In the hallway, away from the accusing stares, Ethan finally stopped and pressed a hand against the glass wall. He knows, Ethan whispered. That's why he's doing this. It's not about money. It was never about money. Lucas stared at him, stunned. You think Adam knows about his father? Ethan swallowed hard. If he doesn't yet, he will soon. On the west coast, the Los Angeles sky blushed orange and pink as the sun dipped behind the skyline. Adam sat across from a woman in her 40s at a small cafe in West Hollywood. She wore a modest winter coat, her hands wrapped around a steaming cup. Thank you for meeting me, Adam said quietly. The woman studied him. I almost didn't. The Dalton brothers are powerful men. So were the people who ruined my father, Adam replied. Power doesn't make someone untouchable. It just makes the fall louder. She held his gaze, something softening in her eyes. I was an analyst back then, she admitted. I flagged the irregularities. I raised concerns. Your father trusted Dalton Corp because of their reputation. In the end, the only one who lost everything was him. Adam's jaw clenched. He'd heard fragments of this story before, whispered between social workers and distant relatives, but never with names, never with proof. Can you testify? He asked. She hesitated. Why are you doing this, Adam? Those men took you in. They gave you a life. A muscle ticked in his cheek. They built that life on the grave they put my father in. She exhaled slowly, looking down at her hands. I can give you documents, she said. Emails, reports, proof that the Dalton twins covered up misconduct to protect their inheritance. Adam's chest tightened. There it was, the confirmation he had been both seeking and dreading. Once this goes public, she warned, it won't just destroy their company. It will destroy them. Adam looked out the window, watching a family cross the street. A father, a mother, a little girl laughing between them. He remembered being that small, holding his father's hand, believing the world was fair. Good, he said quietly. That's the point. Back in Chicago, night had fallen over the Dalton mansion. The lights of the city glimmered beyond the frozen lake. Ethan stood alone in his father's old study, staring at a locked drawer. He hadn't opened it in years. With shaking fingers, he found the key hidden behind a framed photograph of him and Lucas as teenagers. The lock clicked. The drawer slid open. Inside were old contracts, handwritten notes, and a single worn photograph, a man with tired eyes and a gentle smile, standing with a young boy in front of a small house. On the back, in faded ink, "To Richard Dalton, thank you for believing in me. Daniel Hale." Adam's father. Ethan sank into the leather chair, the truth pressing down on him like an invisible weight. "We didn't just raise an orphan," he whispered into the quiet room. "The man we helped destroy." He squeezed his eyes shut, guilt crashing over him in relentless waves. He thought things couldn't possibly get worse. He was wrong. The next 72 hours moved like a storm no one could outrun. By Monday morning, the Dalton name was no longer just a symbol of success. It was a headline. Financial news channels flashed graphics in bold red. "Dalton Corp under federal review." "Whistleblower claims decades-old cover-up." Anchors spoke in crisp, polished tones about a mysterious informant, old transactions, and a long-buried scandal connected to the 2008 crash. They mentioned one particular investor who'd been wiped out, left with nothing. They didn't say his name, not yet. But Ethan and Lucas heard it anyway. Ethan watched from his office, jaw clenched, the TV's glow reflecting painfully in his eyes. Lucas stood behind him, phone in hand, listening to their lawyer speak intense, clipped phrases through the receiver. "They're calling this a preliminary inquiry," the attorney said. "But don't be naive." Someone handed them a neatly packaged story, emails, records, context. They didn't stumble onto this. They were led. "Led by Adam," Lucas muttered. "Can you stop it?" Ethan asked, his voice hollow. "Not stop," the attorney replied. "Only manage, damage control. But if the evidence is as substantial as they're implying, we'll be lucky to walk away with fines instead of charges." The call ended. Silence settled over the room. For years, Ethan and Lucas had been praised for their discipline, their control. Now they were standing in the center of a narrative they didn't own, written by the boy they'd once read bedtime stories to. Lucas finally snapped. He grabbed the remote and shut off the TV. "We fight back," he said. "We expose him. You think Adam's hands are clean. You think he got all that capital alone. Find his investors, dig into his holdings. We hit back legally, publicly." Ethan didn't move. "Lucas," he said quietly, "what if this is our fault?" Lucas turned on him, incredulous. "Our fault? We were kids trying to hold together a dying company. We were old enough to know we were letting our father bury a man," Ethan replied, his voice fraying. "Old enough to know what those numbers meant. We didn't just look away. We benefited from it." For a moment, Lucas had nothing to say. He'd always told himself the same story. It was their father's doing. His decisions, his signature, his deals. The boys were just there. But standing in the middle of a crisis that had his fingerprints all over it, Lucas felt that story crumbling. "Guilt doesn't change the fact that he's trying to destroy us," Lucas finally said. "He wants us ruined. You think he'll stop at the truth? He'll twist whatever he has to." Ethan looked at him sharply. "You really don't see it, do you? He's not twisting anything. He's using the truth because we left it there like a loaded gun." Downstairs, in a smaller, less ornate office, Evelyn stared at yet another encrypted message lighting up her screen. H, they'll make you their scapegoat if this gets worse. You know that, right? H, help me, and I make sure your name stays clean." She closed her eyes. 15 years. 15 years of loyalty to the Dalton empire. She'd watched the twins grow from reckless heirs into polished executives. She'd watched them lie to themselves about what happened in 2008, convincing themselves it had been a necessary evil. But she'd also watched Adam grow up in these corridors. The boy who used to leave doodles on her whiteboard, the teenager who stayed late to ask about balance sheets and risk exposure. The one who once asked her, very quietly, if somebody knows something unfair happened and they stayed, does that make them guilty too? At the time, she dodged the answer. Now, she had to choose one. Her phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. Lobby, 10 minutes, last chance. She didn't need to ask who it was. The lobby of Dalton Tower was a cavern of glass, steel and polished marble, always smelling faintly of cologne and expensive coffee. Today, it smelled like tension. When Evelyn stepped off the elevator, she saw him immediately. Adam stood in the center of the lobby, hands in the pockets of a tailored black coat, shoulders relaxed, as if he were just another visitor. But there was nothing casual in his eyes when he looked at her, eyes darker than she remembered, harder, but still holding the faintest echo of the boy who used to call her Eve and ask her if the markets ever got scared. "You shouldn't be here," she said quietly, walking toward him. "Technically, I'm a significant shareholder," Adam replied. "I have every right to be here." The security guards hovered nearby, unsure whether to intervene. Evelyn flashed them a quick, reassuring nod. Not yet. For a moment, she just studied him, the neat light beard, the expensive watch, the posture that screamed confidence and control. He looked so much like Ethan and Lucas it almost hurt, and yet he was nothing like them. "You've done a lot of damage in a very short time," she said. "They had 15 years to do theirs," Adam replied calmly. "I'm just catching up." "Adam, this goes beyond a boardroom coup. Federal investigations, leaked documents, the press. They've survived everything," he cut in. "Recessions, scandals, buyouts. The only thing they've never faced is what they did to get here. That's all I'm giving them. The truth." Evelyn's voice softened against her will. "Is that really all this is? Truth? No anger? No revenge?" He held her gaze, jaw tight. "They left my father with nothing. They watched him drown so they could keep their empire. Then they took in his son like a charity project and never told him why he didn't have parents anymore. Do you have any idea what that feels like? To live in the house built on the ashes of your own family." She flinched at the rawness in his words. "You think they didn't care," she said. "But I've seen them carry that guilt, even if they refuse to name it. They loved you, Adam, in the only broken way they knew how." "Love without honesty isn't love," he replied. "It's control." He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small flash drive, holding it between them. "These are my terms," he said. "I'll stop feeding new evidence to the press and regulators if they do 3 things. Publicly admit what happened to my father, resign from Dalton Corp, and transfer controlling interest to a trust that compensates every investor who was defrauded in 2008. Evelyn stared at the drive. "You know they'll never agree to that." "Then I guess we find out how much their legacy is worth to them." "Adam, for what it's worth," he added quietly, "your name isn't in any of this. I kept you out. You were the only one who ever asked if what they were doing was right." She swallowed hard. "That doesn't make me innocent." "No," he said, "but it makes you salvageable." For the first time, her composure cracked. "You're asking me to choose," she said, "between the men who signed my paychecks and the boy I watched grow up. I'm asking you to choose between the truth and the lie we've all been living in," Adam replied. "You don't owe them your soul, Evelyn." He placed the flash drive in her palm and closed her fingers around it. "Give them the choice," he said, "one last time. After that, I don't hold back." Then he turned and walked toward the revolving doors, the winter wind rushing in as he stepped out into the gray Chicago morning. Evelyn stood frozen in the center of the lobby, the weight of the drive burning into her skin. Upstairs, Ethan and Lucas were already in crisis mode when Evelyn entered their office without knocking. "We're in the middle of a call," Lucas snapped, then stopped when he saw her face. "What happened?" Evelyn shut the door behind her. "He was here," she said. The brothers went still. "What did he want?" Ethan asked. She walked to the desk and placed the flash drive on it as if she were setting down a bomb. "He wants the truth," she said, And he's not bluffing anymore. He has documents, witnesses, everything. He's ready to trade your legacy for his justice." Ethan stared at the small piece of plastic, feeling his throat tighten. Lucas scoffed. "His justice. He wants to be a martyr for investors who don't even remember his father's name." Evelyn turned on him, eyes flashing. "Maybe he just doesn't want to be the only one who remembers." The room fell silent. Slowly, Evelyn looked between the two brothers, men she had believed in, protected, enabled. "If you don't face this now," she said quietly, "you won't be negotiating with Adam. You'll be negotiating with prosecutors, and they won't offer you terms." Ethan looked at her with something like pleading in his eyes. "What are you saying?" She hesitated for only a moment. "I'm saying you have one chance to do the right thing before the world forces you to. Everyone thought the Dalton Empire would either crush the threat or survive it unchanged. Everyone thought it was just another corporate war. Everyone thought it was over. It wasn't." That night, the Dalton mansion didn't feel like a home. It felt like a museum of a life about to be stripped from its owners. Rain had replaced the snow, streaking the tall windows and turning the lake into a dark, restless sheet. Ethan sat in the dim light of his father's old study, the same flash drive Adam had sent resting on the desk. He hadn't plugged it in yet. He didn't need to. He knew what was on it, or at least enough of it to understand the danger. Lucas paced near the fireplace, tie loosened, eyes burning with a mix of anger and exhaustion. "This is blackmail," he snapped. "We hand him everything. Our company, our reputation, our lives, just because he's angry and hurting and rich enough to stir up a storm." Ethan didn't look up. "This isn't blackmail," he said quietly. "This is the bill coming due." Lucas stopped. "We were 24s, Ethan. Our father made those calls, not us." "We didn't stop him," Ethan replied. "We watched him push through trades we knew were wrong. We watched that line item with Daniel Hale's name disappear under losses. We signed the filings. We cashed the bonuses. We built an empire on top of it." He finally lifted his eyes to his twin. "We also invited his son into our house," he added. "Gave him our last name in every way that mattered, except the one that did." Lucas's jaw tightened. "You think telling him the truth back then wouldn't have destroyed him?" "Maybe," Ethan said. "But hiding it turned his grief into a weapon." There was a knock at the door. Evelyn stepped in, her expression tired but clear. "We need to decide," she said. "Now, the press is circling. The regulators have requested documents. This thing is moving with or without us." Behind her stood a man in a dark suit, their attorney, Jonathan Reed, carrying a stack of folders. "Here are your options," Jonathan said, setting the files on the desk. "Fight everything, deny everything, and drag this out for years, or negotiate a controlled admission, voluntary resignation, partial restitution, fines, supervised restructuring." Lucas crossed his arms. "You mean surrender?" "I mean survival," Jonathan replied calmly. "You may not keep Dalton Corp the way you know it, but you might keep your freedom and your ability to build something else." Ethan nodded slowly. "What about Adam?" Jonathan hesitated. "Legally, he's a whistleblower and a hostile shareholder. If you cooperate, regulators may view his role as less necessary. If you don't, he becomes their star witness." Evelyn spoke up. "He's given you an opening they won't. He wants specific things, a public admission, your resignation, restitution for harmed investors. Ugly, but clean." Lucas laughed bitterly. "So we hand him the company like a gift-wrapped apology?" Evelyn met his gaze. "You hand him the truth. What he does with it is on him." Silence stretched. Ethan reached for the flash drive, rolling it between his fingers. "What if we get ahead of this?" he asked. "A press conference. Our terms, our confession, no spin." Jonathan frowned. "That's risky." "So is pretending we're innocent," Ethan replied. Lucas stared at his brother, disbelief warring with betrayal. "You're really considering this?" he said. "You're willing to burn everything because Adam is hurt and angry." Ethan stood, his reflection matching Lucas's almost perfectly, two versions of the same man, divided by one choice. "I'm willing to burn the lie," he said. "Maybe that's the only thing he's asking us to do." The next morning, Chicago woke up to a notification that rippled through phones and news feeds across the city. Dalton Corp. To issue live statement amid investigation. 11th Sashua. M. In a sleek Los Angeles penthouse, Adam read the headline in silence. The TV was on mute, cycling through talking heads, speculating about what the statement would mean. He didn't believe in miracles. He believed in leverage. Still, something flickered in his chest. Not hope, not exactly. Something more fragile. "Don't be stupid," he told himself. "They'll spin it. Blame the markets. Blame your father's risk tolerance. They always do." His phone buzzed. "Unknown number," he answered. "Yeah." A familiar voice came through, steady but strained. "Adam, it's Ethan." The sound of his name in that voice, the one that used to call him Kiddo and Buddy when he was small, sent a sharp, unwelcome ache through him. "You got my terms," Adam said. "You calling to negotiate or to threaten?" "I'm calling to ask you to watch," Ethan replied. "That's all." Adam's jaw clenched. "If this is some performance, it's not," Ethan said. "You want truth. You'll get it. After that, do whatever you need to do." There was something in his tone Adam wasn't used to hearing. Not power, not entitlement. Something closer to surrender. "Lucas agreed to this?" Adam asked skeptically. A beat of silence. "He'll be there," Ethan said, which wasn't exactly an answer. "Fine," Adam muttered. "I'll watch. But don't think a few tears and a speech erase what you did." "I don't," Ethan said quietly. "Nothing erases it." When the call ended, Adam stared at his phone for a long moment. Then he turned up the volume on the TV. At 11 c.a.m., the lobby of Dalton Tower transformed into a press stage. Cameras lined the back wall. Journalists murmured, adjusting mics and lenses. Employees crowded the mezzanine above, leaning over railings to watch the fall of the men whose names were etched into the building's stone. Ethan and Lucas stepped up to the podium together, as they always had, matching suits, matching ties, matching faces, but for the first time in their lives, they didn't feel like a united front. Evelyn stood off to the side, hands clasped, heart hammering. Jonathan hovered near the back, expression grave. The room quieted. Ethan approached the microphone. "Thank you for coming," he began, his voice echoing off marble and glass. "For many years, Dalton Corp has prided itself on stability, innovation, and integrity. Today, we're here to admit that the last word in that list hasn't always been true." Lucas's head snapped toward him, eyes wide. This wasn't the sanitized version they'd drafted with Jonathan. Ethan had gone off script. Jonathan paled. Evelyn's breath caught. "In 2008, Ethan continued, our company made choices during the financial crisis that were designed to protect our inheritance at the expense of certain investors who trusted us. One of those investors was a man named Daniel Hale." The name dropped into the room like a stone into deep water. Reporters scribbled, cameras zoomed in, a murmur swelled. "Daniel Hale lost everything," Ethan said, voice steady but laced with pain. "Our father authorized those moves. But we," he glanced at Lucas, "were not innocent bystanders. We saw the irregularities. We signed off. We buried the consequences under numbers and paperwork and told ourselves it was necessary." Lucas stared at him, fury and fear warring in his eyes. Ethan swallowed hard. "Years later," he went on, "we took in an orphaned boy, bright, loyal, talented. His name was Adam. We raised him in the house, built on what was taken from his father. and we never told him the truth. For a full second, you could have heard a pin drop. In a just world, Ethan said, voice roughening, we would have told this story first. We would have come forward on our own. Instead, we let someone else drag the truth into the light. For that, we deserve what comes next. He drew in a shaky breath. Effective immediately, my brother and I will step down from our positions at Dalton Corp. We will cooperate fully with all regulatory investigations, and we will support the creation of an independent trust to provide restitution to investors harmed by our actions in 2008. Reporters erupted with questions, calling his name, shouting over each other. Beside him, Lucas leaned toward the mic, eyes blazing. This was not a unilateral decision, Lucas said, voice cutting through the noise. Our father. Ethan reached out and put a hand on his arm. Don't, he said softly. We've hidden behind him long enough. For a moment, Lucas looked like he might explode. Then, something in his posture collapsed, not in defeat exactly, but in the sudden, crushing realization that there was no path back to the life they'd had yesterday. On millions of screens across the country, the Dalton twins stood side by side, confessing to the world that their empire wasn't as clean as it looked. In Los Angeles, Adam watched from his penthouse, fingers curling into fists. This was what he'd wanted. This was what he'd fought for. This was justice. So why did it feel like someone had cut something out of his chest? The press conference ended in a blur of shouted questions and flashing cameras. Ethan stepped away from the podium, his heart pounding, his future dissolving in front of him. Evelyn approached, eyes bright with unshed tears. You did the right thing, she said. Too late, he replied. Maybe, she said, but not never. He glanced back at the sea of cameras, knowing Adam was watching, wherever he was. For him, Ethan murmured, it might still be never. He had no idea that Adam, watching the broadcast, was about to make a choice that would change all of their lives in a way none of them expected. By late afternoon, the sky over Chicago had turned the color of bruised steel. The city moved on, cabs honking, trains rattling, people scrolling past headlines on their phones. But inside the Dalton mansion, time felt strangely suspended. The press conference replayed on every channel. Clips of Ethan's confession ran side by side with old footage of the twins ringing the opening bell at the stock exchange. The contrast was jarring. Two young men at the height of their power, and the same faces today stripped of certainty. Ethan muted the television. Lucas stood by the window, staring out at the lake, his reflection warped in the rain-streaked glass. You didn't stick to the statement, he said finally. I know, Ethan replied. You said his father's name. I know, Lucas turned, eyes burning. You turned a controlled admission into a public execution. Ethan met his gaze. No, I turned it into the truth. Before Lucas could respond, the security intercom buzzed. Mr. Dalton, the guard's voice crackled through the speaker. There's someone at the gate. Says you're expecting him. Ethan frowned. Who? The guard hesitated. Adam Hale, sir. Lucas stiffened. Ethan's heart skipped. They hadn't invited him. They hadn't planned whatever this was. Let him in, Ethan said quietly. Are you insane? Lucas snapped. After what he's done? He just watched us set fire to our lives on national television, Ethan replied. If he's coming here in person, we hear him out. Lucas stared at him, then shook his head in disbelief. You never learned, did you? You still think everything can be fixed if you just talk enough? Ethan didn't answer. Minutes later, the front door opened with a low, familiar creak. Adam stepped inside the foyer, the same foyer where he'd run across polished floors as a kid, sliding in his socks, laughing as the twins chased him. Now, his steps were measured, his expression tight. He hadn't expected it to feel like this. He'd imagined this moment 1,000 times, coming back as the man who had finally outgrown them, towering over the house that used to make him feel small. He'd pictured satisfaction, triumph, maybe even a little peace. All he felt was hollow. Ethan appeared at the edge of the staircase landing. Lucas was a few steps behind him, arms crossed, defensive even from a distance. For a moment, the three of them just stared. Same faces, same eyes, same house. Completely different people. "Adam," Ethan said, coming down the steps. "Thank you for—" "Don't thank me," Adam cut in. "I didn't do that for you." Lucas scoffed. "You did it for yourself, for your ego, for your revenge." Adam's gaze flicked to him. "I did it for my father, the one you erased from your ledgers and then from your conscience." The words landed like a slap. Lucas flinched, but his voice stayed sharp. "You think one man brought down in 2008 is special? People lost everything. Markets crashed. Your father—" "Don't," Ethan said softly. "Don't rewrite this for him." Adam's jaw clenched. He looked from one twin to the other, seeing echoes of the men who'd taught him how to tie a tie, how to drive, how to read a balance sheet, and the men who'd signed away his childhood without ever admitting it. "You gave me a speech today," Adam said. "Congratulations. The world finally knows what you did. But that doesn't change the fact that without me, you would have kept lying." Ethan nodded once. No argument, no defense. "You're right," he said. "We would have. That's on us." The admission caught Adam off guard. He'd come prepared for a fight, for denial, for spin. Not this. He pulled in a breath, steadying himself. "I'm not here for an apology," he said, "and I'm not here to forgive you." "Then why are you here?" Lucas demanded. Adam reached into his coat and took out a small, worn envelope. "This was sent to my mother 3 weeks after my father died," he said. "I found it in a box a few months ago, buried under old paperwork. She never opened it." He held it out. Ethan took it carefully, staring at the return address. Richard Dalton, their father. His hands trembled as he slid a finger under the brittle flap. Inside was a single page, written in their father's familiar, slanted handwriting. The first line made Ethan's stomach twist. "To Daniel's family," he read silently, lips moving. As he reached the middle, his face changed. Confusion, disbelief, then something like shock. He swallowed hard and passed the letter to Lucas. Unable to say the words out loud, Lucas read it, eyes darting back and forth. When he finished, he looked up. Color drained from his face. "What is this?" he whispered. Adam's voice was tight. "You tell me." Evelyn had come in quietly, pulled by instinct more than invitation. She stood near the doorway now, watching, not yet noticed. Ethan cleared his throat, voice rough. "It's a confession," he said, "of a different kind." He looked at Adam. "Your father," Ethan began carefully, "wasn't just an innocent investor. He made side bets, unreported ones. He leveraged assets he didn't disclose, used margin he didn't fully understand. Our father warned him in that letter that if the market turned, he'd lose everything." He paused, choosing his words with painful care. "Richard admits we pushed products that were too risky," Ethan continued. "He admits he protected the family name over being fully transparent, but he also says Daniel lied on some of his own disclosures, that he hid his level of risk from his own family. From you." Adam's expression didn't change. "You expect me to believe that?" he asked quietly. "Now, when it's convenient?" "No," Ethan said. "I don't expect you to believe anything from us. But that letter, that's your father's story too, not just ours." Lucas's voice cracked in for the first time without anger. "We ruined him," he said. "That doesn't change. Our decisions pushed him over the edge. But he wasn't. He wasn't the saint you've had to make him to survive this." The room fell silent. Evelyn finally spoke, stepping forward, I saw some of those files back then, she said. Not the letter, but the margin reports. The inconsistencies. Your father was a good man, Adam, but he was also desperate. And desperate people take risks they shouldn't. Adam turned toward her, hurt flashing in his eyes. Why are you telling me this now? Because the truth isn't clean, Evelyn said softly. Not theirs. Not your father's. Not yours. You've made them face their part. They needed that. Maybe you need to face that this story isn't as simple as you being the wronged son of a perfect victim. The words struck deeper than he wanted them to. For years, Adam had carried a picture in his head. His father as the honest man, crushed by corrupt elites who played games with other people's lives. The Daltons as the embodiment of that corruption. It was the story that fueled him when his anger ran dry. If his father had lied too, if he'd gambled with their future willingly, then what was Adam fighting for now? What do you want from me? Adam asked, suddenly tired. To feel sorry for you, to take back what I've done. No, Ethan said quietly. We don't want anything from you. He stepped closer, the distance between them shrinking to a few feet, close enough for Adam to see the lines that guilt and stress had carved around Ethan's eyes. We raised you, Ethan said, badly, imperfectly, selfishly at times, but we did love you. That doesn't erase what we did to your father, and it doesn't erase what you've done to us. The damage is real on both sides. He took a breath. I just don't want you to spend the rest of your life burning everything down because a younger version of you needed the world to be simpler than it really was. For the first time since he walked in, Adam looked uncertain. He glanced at the letter still in Lucas's hand, then at the house, the staircase, the framed photos on the wall, some of them with him in them, smiling like he belonged. You step down, Adam said slowly. You admit what you did. You help fix what you broke. That had to happen. That's non-negotiable. It's already happening, Evelyn said. The board is restructuring. Regulators are involved. The trust is being drafted. You did that. Adam nodded, jaw tight. Then maybe, he said, I don't have to finish what I started the way I planned. Lucas frowned. What does that mean? Adam looked at him, and for a brief second, the anger in his eyes flickered with something else. Grief, maybe, or exhaustion. It means I'll stop feeding new evidence to the press, he said. I'll cooperate with regulators, but I won't push for criminal charges beyond what they decide, and I won't try to take Dalton Corp for myself. Lucas stared. You were planning to run it. Adam's mouth twitched in something that wasn't quite a smile. Once upon a time, I wanted to beat you at your own game, he said. Now, I've seen what your throne costs. I don't want it. Ethan swallowed. Then, what do you want? Adam hesitated. For the first time, he said quietly, I don't know. The admission hung in the air, naked and human. For so long, his purpose had been razor sharp. Destroy them, expose them, make the world see what they'd done. Now that the world did, he was left holding the pieces of a life he hadn't planned beyond vengeance. Evelyn spoke gently. Maybe that's not the worst place to be, she said. Empty, but honest. At least now, you're not living in someone else's lie. Rain pattered harder against the windows. Somewhere in the house, the old heating system clicked on with a familiar hum Adam remembered from childhood. I'll send my attorneys your way, he said finally. We'll put everything in writing. He turned toward the door, then paused. You were right about one thing, he added without looking back. Love without honesty isn't love. But it may be honesty without any mercy isn't justice either. Ethan's eyes stung. Adam, he said, voice low, if we had told you the truth back then. Adam shook his head. You didn't. That's the life we get. He stepped out into the rain. Ethan stood in the foyer, watching the gate close behind him. feeling something break, not with the shattering crack of glass, but with the quiet snap of a rope that had been pulled too tight for too long. Lucas leaned back against the wall, exhaling shakily. "So that's it?" he asked. "He blows us up, walks away, and we rebuild." Ethan didn't answer, because none of them knew yet that the biggest consequence of this war wouldn't be the loss of Dalton Corp at all. It would be what happened when three men, bound by blood, guilt, and a dead man's choices, tried to build any kind of life on the ruins. Everyone thought the confession was the end of the story. It wasn't. 6 months later, the Dalton name meant something very different. Dalton Corp still existed, but the twins were no longer its public face. A grey-haired restructuring specialist sat in the corner office now. The company logo remained on the tower, but people no longer said it with effortless admiration. They said it with a story attached about greed, truth, and the price of both. Ethan and Lucas kept a low profile. There were hearings, testimonies, fines that made headlines, but in the end, the regulators chose restitution over prison. Years of cooperation, transparency, and the creation of the trust tipped the scale just enough. The Dalton brothers walked out of the courthouse not as exonerated men, but as marked ones. They sold the mansion by the lake. They moved into separate places, not out of hatred, but because the silence between them had grown too heavy to share the same walls. Ethan chose a modest apartment overlooking a park. Lucas chose a high-rise with fewer memories and more distractions. Evelyn stayed on at Dalton Corp, not as CFO, but as part of the independent oversight committee monitoring the restitution trust. She'd decided that if she was going to carry the weight of her past, she might as well be the one lifting on the other side too. And Adam quietly disappeared from the headlines as soon as the hearings ended. He turned down every interview offer, refused every podcast, every documentary pitch, every exclusive sit-down about the orphan who brought down the empire that raised him. Once the system was in motion, he stepped out of the frame. Instead, he started showing up in places with no cameras, small investor workshops, community college classrooms, non-profit meetings about financial literacy in underserved neighborhoods. He never walked in as the Adam Hale from the Dalton scandal. Just Adam, tall, quiet, focused. The money from the trust began to flow, not just as checks sent to old investors, but as seed funding for programs designed to keep the same kind of desperation from swallowing other families. One of those programs sat on the west side of Chicago, in a renovated brick building that used to be a shuttered grocery store. On a warm autumn afternoon, a small crowd gathered outside its glass doors. A simple plaque had been mounted beside the entrance, Hale Dalton Financial Learning Center, in honor of Daniel Hale and all who lost everything and tried again. Ethan stood at the edge of the crowd, hands in his pockets, sunglasses on. He hadn't been invited to the opening. He'd found out about it from a quiet email Evelyn forwarded to him, with no commentary, just the flyer. He hadn't planned to speak. He just wanted to see it with his own eyes, not through a report. Inside, volunteers moved between folding chairs, arranging pamphlets and coffee urns. A local councilwoman stepped up to a microphone to say a few words about second chances and financial education. Ethan didn't listen. His attention snapped to the man standing off to the side, near the hallway that led to the classrooms. Adam, no cameras, no entourage. Just a stack of folders under his arm and a name tag pinned to his shirt with Adam H. written in simple black letters. For a moment, Ethan considered leaving. Instead, he took a breath and walked inside. Adam saw him about 10 seconds before Ethan reached him. There was a flicker in his expression. Surprise. Then something more guarded. "You shouldn't be here," Adam said, but there was no real venom in it, just reflex. "I'm not here to speak," Ethan replied. "I just wanted to see what you did with all of this." Adam glanced around at the modest space, the whiteboards, the beat-up chairs, the donated laptops. "This isn't all of it," he said. "Just the part that fits in one building." Ethan nodded, a faint, sad smile touching his mouth. "It's more than we ever planned to do," he admitted. "We just wrote checks to make problems go away. You made them mean something." Adam didn't answer. For a moment, they stood there, two men with the same bone structure and the same tired eyes, joined by a history neither of them wanted and both of them had shaped. Finally, Ethan reached into his jacket pocket. "I have something for you," he said. "I should have given it to you months ago." He handed over a folded piece of paper, not the original, but a carefully made copy. Adam unfolded it. It was the letter from Richard Dalton, the one they'd opened that night in the mansion. But this version had a section highlighted in pale yellow, near the bottom, a part Adam realized he hadn't truly absorbed the first time. He'd been too angry, too flooded. "If something happens that I can't undo," the letter read, "and if the worst comes for me, I'm asking one thing as a father to another. Look after my boy. He's stubborn and too smart for his own good. He won't forgive you easily. He might never forgive me, but if you can give him a life, give him a chance to grow up without seeing how badly I failed him, then at least one part of this won't have been a total loss." There was a smudged line beneath it, as if Richard had hesitated before adding one more sentence. "Tell him I loved him in my own broken way, and that I was not only a victim. I made choices too." Adam stared at the page, his throat tightening. He'd burned his anger into his father's memory so deeply that he'd forgotten his father was allowed to be flawed, too, allowed to be human, allowed to be wrong, and still love his son. "You never showed me this part," Adam whispered. "We barely saw it ourselves," Ethan said softly. "We were too busy seeing what it said about us, about our guilt. It took me a long time to understand what it said about you." Adam swallowed, eyes still on the paper. "That I wasn't just a symbol. That you were someone both our fathers failed and loved at the same time," Ethan replied, "and that we didn't choose you out of charity. We chose you because one broken man asked another to take care of his son. We did it badly. We lied. We hid, but it wasn't random." Adam folded the letter very carefully, fingers unsteady. "So what?" he asked, voice quieter than before. "I'm supposed to say thank you for the half-life I got, instead of no life at all?" "No," Ethan said, "you're not supposed to say anything. I just thought you deserved to know the whole story before you decide who you want to be next." There it was. Not an apology this time, not a plea, just a door opened as far as Ethan could open it. In the main room, the councilwoman finished her speech. People clapped. Someone laughed. A small group of teenagers wandered past the hallway, peeking in at the two men standing there. One of them, a boy no older than 16, nodded toward Adam. "Hey, are you the guy teaching the budgeting workshop?" he asked. "They said you used to work with, like, real Wall Street people." Adam blinked, pulled out of the fog. "Yeah," he said, "that's me." The kid grinned. "Cool, I signed up. My mom says if I'm going to mess up with money, better to do it on paper first." Adam almost smiled. "Your mom's smarter than most hedge fund managers." The teenager disappeared back into the crowd. Ethan watched the exchange, something softening in his features. "You're good at this," he said. "Better than we ever were in a boardroom." Adam shrugged, but it wasn't as sharp as before. "Maybe ruin teaches faster than profit." He hesitated, then added, "I saw the revised trust documents. You didn't have to keep our name on the center." Ethan shook his head. "That wasn't us. That was the committee's call. Probably Evelyn's idea." Adam huffed. "Figures." They fell quiet. Finally, Adam folded the letter one last time and slipped it into his pocket. "I don't forgive you," he said, not unkindly, just stating a fact. "I don't know if I ever will," Ethan nodded. "I don't expect you to. But," Adam added, "I also don't wake up every morning trying to figure out new ways to destroy you anymore. That's something, I guess." For the first time, Ethan let himself really look at him, not as a boy he'd failed or an enemy he'd faced, but as a man who'd walked through the same fire from a different direction. "It's a lot," Ethan said quietly. "It's more than we deserve." Adam shook his head, looking past him toward the busy room. "It's not about what you deserve," he replied. "It's about what I deserve, and I deserve a life that isn't built on hating two men forever, even if they earned some of that hate." The words settled between them like a fragile bridge. Out in the main room, someone called Adam's name. His first workshop was starting. He took a step backward. "You should go," Ethan said. "They actually need you in there." Adam hesitated. "You should come by sometime," he heard himself say, surprising them both. "Not as Dalton, just as Ethan. Sit in the back, listen. Maybe you'll hear the kids ask the questions we never knew how to ask." A small, stunned pause. "I'd like that," Ethan said. Adam gave a single nod, then turned toward the doorway. As he walked away, Ethan noticed a detail on the back wall he hadn't seen at first. A simple framed sketch of a raven, signed with the small symbol Adam used to draw as a child. Underneath it, in neat letters, "Every empire begins with trust and ends with truth. What you build after that is up to you." Ethan stepped outside into the sunlight, the cool breeze brushing against his face. The Dalton brothers had lost their empire. Adam had lost the version of his past that let him stay angry without question. None of them got back what was taken in 2008. But from the wreckage, something else had started to grow. Not forgiveness, not yet, but the first faint outline of lives no longer chained to secrets and lies. Some people would always remember the story as the one where the millionaire twin brothers raised an orphan who grew up to destroy them. The truth was messier. He hadn't destroyed them. He'd forced them to finally see what they had already broken, and then, in the quiet aftermath, he'd helped build something that might outlast them all. If you're enjoying these stories, subscribe to the channel and follow the next videos. And tell us in the comments what this story meant to you.